Bosses. I love me some bosses. One of the things I love the most about the Fromsoft games is these bosses, and when done right, they provide epic moments, challenging skill checks, and some of the most thrilling moments in gaming. They're the things that keep me coming back to do challenge runs time and again, and I've often thought of doing this video. Many people have done some iteration of this before, and I guess now it's time for me to throw my hat in the ring as well. Now you might be asking, why is it top 12? Well, because these 12 all have things I want to talk about, and I didn't feel like I wanted to leave any of them out or mess around with honorary mentions or any of that shit. Because I love making spreadsheets and adding numerical values to things, here are the 4 categories I'll be scoring the bosses on out of 5. Number 1, combat mechanics. What the actual fight is like in terms of their moves, what you have to do to avoid them, when you can punish them, and if there's any specific gimmicks involved. Aesthetics, pretty straightforward, judging how epic the boss looks both in terms of appearance and the visuals of its attacks and any cutscenes that may take place during the fight. Arena, the area that you fight the boss in, what does it add visually and mechanically during the fight. Music, a powerful score can really add atmosphere to any encounter, so music is something that definitely counts highly for me. Just to say, I'm not going to be including any of the actual boss music in this video, just because of copyright reasons. You get stung for putting it in straight away, so I'm unfortunately not going to be playing any of it here, but you know, if you want to listen to any of them, you can always just search them out on YouTube. So this will give them a total score out of 20, which I'll be using to rank them. I'm also purposefully avoiding including anything about the boss run back in here, as I want to judge the boss purely on its own merits instead of the area leading up to it. Now, you may not agree with all of these. You might see number 12 and say, but JK Leeds, X boss from X game should score higher in X category as opposed to this one, you absolute penis. And you know what? You're right. I mean, not a bit about me being a penis, but about feeling differently about some of these scorings, and that's because it's your opinion and there are no wrong answers here. Everyone will feel differently when it comes to this topic. Everyone has different bosses or music or arenas they like. Hell, some people maybe would even pick the Bed of Chaos as their favourite Fromsoft boss. On that note, please feel free to share any thoughts you have on your favourite Fromsoft bosses in the comments below, especially if you're one of the people who thinks that Bed of Chaos is the best Fromsoft boss. I'd love to hear from you especially. Lastly, if you enjoy this video, please do like and subscribe to support the cause of the content. So with that all sorted, let's move on to our number 12 entry. Number 12, Sir Alonne from Dark Souls 2. Okay, so minor spoiler, this is the one and only Dark Souls 2 boss on my list here, but I believe he's pretty deserving of this. I've made no secret that I don't enjoy a lot of what Dark Souls 2 offers from a boss perspective, and trust me, you'll be getting a lot more of that from me when the next video comes out. But the unfortunate truth here is there is a lot of dodgy hitboxes in this game. Sir Alonne isn't exactly an exception, but there's enough good around the rest of his moveset and combat style that make this feel like an actual duel. It's not amazing, but it's enough to earn it a solid 3 out of 5 for combat mechanics. For aesthetics, I give him a 3.5 out of 5. I don't like that you can't see his face properly, but I give extra score for his sitting at the start of the fight and his seppuku if you manage to beat him without taking a hit. Those are some really nice additional touches. The arena also scores a 3.5 out of 5. It looks nice and I think it's a fitting, if perhaps not fully remarkable, place for a showdown between two warriors. For music, I scored a 3, it's decent and still sounds pretty epic, but it didn't stay with me and I never felt the urge to seek it out after. So we score Sir Alonne a respectable 13 out of 20. Definitely the best fight Dark Souls 2 has to offer in my opinion. Number 11 we have Knight Artorias from Dark Souls 1. This guy was a great choice for a DLC boss in Dark Souls 1, as you hear his name mentioned a lot throughout the base game, so there's a good build up to this fight. Mechanically, I'd say he's pretty solid. His speed works well in Dark Souls 1 in that he's faster than most bosses in the game, but doesn't feel like he's too fast to avoid with the speed of movement the game allows you. I give this guy a solid 4 out of 5 for mechanics in the context of where you're fighting him. For aesthetic, I again don't really like that you can't see his face. His hood thing looks kind of weird, but I guess maybe this was due to graphical limitations at the time. I'm not sure, but I give him a 3 out of 5 for this, as his opening cutscene is still pretty cool, and his charge-up aura is quite badass looking as well. The arena is this cool coliseum, and again feels like a good place for two warriors to fight, although it's not something super memorable for me. I'd score it a 3 out of 5. Lastly, the music again is pretty good, although not the most memorable. It's definitely better than Sir Alonne's. It's different in that it's a lot more somber, reflecting that you're fighting a once proud warrior who is now fallen. I give this a 3.5 out of 5, which give Artorias a score of 13.5 out of 20 in total. I put him a little bit above Sir Alonne just because the mechanics of Dark Souls 1 allow this fight to work better. But this isn't the last we'll be talking about Dark Souls 1. Number 10. Kalameet from Dark Souls 1. The first proper dragon boss in the series. No, Dragon God, Seath, and Gaping Dragon do not count, and this guy really delivers. He probably killed me the most of any boss in Dark Souls 1 on my first playthrough. Again, he's pretty mechanically solid and works well with Dark Souls 1's combat speed. The only markdown I give is the hitbox on his head swipe is kinda dodgy, so I'll score Kalameet a 4 out of 5 for combat mechanics. Aesthetics wise, he's a black dragon with a red glowing eye. Pretty badass, although would have liked some more definition in his face, but that's probably due to the graphical limitations here. I score this bat a 4 out of 5 for looks. He definitely inspires fear. As for arena and music, I'd score a 3 out of 5 for each of these. The Valley Arena and its daunting theme are both decent, but don't do anything too interesting for me. This gives Kalameet a score of 14 out of 20. They finally did a good job with the dragon boss after several attempts. Also, side note, Kalameet has probably the most awesome cutscene in Dark Souls 1 outside of battle, with Goth shooting him down. Gets me every time. Number 9. Malenia from Elden Ring. Well, from the earliest game in our list to the most recent, Malenia might well be the most polarizing boss on this list. When Elden Ring came out, there was a lot of hatred towards her combat mechanics, shouting that Fromsoft went too far to make something difficult and lost their usual sense of balance. I'm actually going to score her a 3 out of 5, and I'll tell you why. I think a lot of her movement feels really fluid. I like that she remains passive in her first phase but is far more aggressive in the second, and I think the healing is a unique mechanic which adds an extra layer of tension. I do find her fight very fun, but I always do use Bloodhound Step because of Waterfowl Dance, and as much as I find the fight fun this way, I don't like that it forces you to really use a specific Ash of War unless you're able to do crazy frame perfect dodging that only a small percentage of players have ever been able to pull off. So for that reason, I knocked off 2 points. Aesthetic, I think her second phase is very cool and unique, and I really like the visuals of the flower attack and the petals that fly off her after every move. I give her a 4 out of 5 for this. The music is pretty great, to be fair, especially in the second phase, so I'd score a 4 out of 5 for this also, and actually a 4 out of 5 for the arena. I like the center of the tree aesthetic and it fits very well with her style. This gives Malenia a score of 15 out of 20. It's a bit of a shame because although this is a good score, she potentially could have scored even higher with a few tweaks to her moveset. Number 8. Sword Saint Isshin from Sekiro. One of the more difficult bosses in the series, especially on higher new game cycles. Mechanically, this guy is a beast and the fight transpires across 4 different phases, more than any other in Fromsoft history. I score him 4.5 out of 5 for combat. The only reason I deduct half a point is I'm not the biggest fan of the lightning mechanic from Sekiro, which is crucial in the last phase of this. Otherwise though, this is a great fight. Saying that, I didn't find him visually all that exciting. He's a noble samurai warrior, but we don't really get to tap into the creativity I've seen from other FromSoft bosses in different games. I score him a 3.5 out of 5. But what aesthetic he lacks personally is made up for in this epic boss arena. Looks like the setting of a final showdown in a samurai film. I score this a 4.5 out of 5. The music, while good, kind of lacks the impact for me of the other boss soundtracks, and I didn't find it all that memorable, so I scored it a 3 out of 5, giving the Sword Saint a score of 15.5 out of 20 as well. Maybe surprisingly though, this is not my favourite Sekiro boss. Number 7. Genichiro from Sekiro. I don't think many people would put Genichiro above Isshin, but let me explain why. When I first played Sekiro, Genichiro was the boss I died to the most by far. Part of this is because it's the first boss where you really have to learn and understand Sekiro's combat. I initially felt so frustrated I just couldn't get my head around it. I actually considered giving up, but suddenly something clicked and my muscle memory seemed to be running in overdrive. This boss taught me how to play the game in a brutal training session, and I loved it. The feeling of finally getting it was amazing, so I scored this 4.5 out of 5 for combat mechanics. Again, I don't like the lightning, so I knock off half a point. It's 3.5 for aesthetic, similar to Isshin, and 3 out of 5 for music. Again, similar to Isshin, it's good but not super memorable. And also a 4.5 out of 5 for the arena. Fighting at the top of this castle, again, feels like the finale of a samurai movie. There's a lot of comparisons between Isshin here. Genichiro actually scores 15.5 out of 20, same as Isshin, but I rank Genichiro higher just because of that initial first experience of fighting him and overcoming it. It was one of probably the best moments I've had in any of these games, and this is a truly excellent skill check boss. Number 6. Ornstein and Smough from Dark Souls 1. Speaking of skill check bosses, this next one is probably the best skill check boss in the series history. You know there was no way this wasn't making the list. This is the ultimate get good or go home experience and forces you to approach the fight differently than anything you've faced before. Fromsoft have tried many times to do dual boss fights since then, but never quite managed to do it this well. Ornstein and Smough are a perfect balance for each other, one slow and heavy, the other fast and light. It's also the first boss fight in Fromsoft history with 2 phases, and the second phase actually differs depending on which one you kill first, which is very unique and adds replay value to this boss for me. I'd score this 4 out of 5 for combat mechanics. It's executed great within the confines of Dark Souls 1, but it shows its age a bit with stuff like Ornstein's kind of glitchy dash attack, where sometimes he just stops and starts again mid-move. For aesthetics, I'll give these guys 4 out of 5. Ornstein's armor looks cool, but I don't know how I feel about Smough's giant man tits. He does definitely look intimidating though. The arena looks cool, and the pillars were a wise choice to add, helping to balance the fight and allow you some reprieve, so I'll score this a 4 out of 5 also. Lastly, to round this out, the music also gets a 4 out of 5 for me. I do think there were better compositions in the later games, but this is definitely memorable for one of the earlier ones. So Tweedledum and Tweedledee scores 16 out of 20. It makes me wonder if we'll ever see a dual boss fight that manages to equal this one. It hasn't happened yet. Number 5. Sister Friede from Dark Souls 3. Well, we've made it into the top 5 here of this list, and this battle here feels like an epic saga. You know, if you ignore the middle phase, Sister Friede kind of feels like Malenia done right. A more passive first phase with a final phase where she is super aggressive. She also has an aerial attack here, but it's not total bullshit. If you look back, my fight with Sister Friede was actually the first gaming video I ever uploaded to this channel. Mechanically, this is fast paced and keeps you on your toes with lots of different types of attacks, and the little troll of giving you the Titanite slab after phase 2 makes you think it's over, but it's not. That's a nice touch. So I score this a 4.5 out of 5. I only knock off the half point as I feel like the middle phase doesn't really add that much, but it's still pretty good. For aesthetic, I score a 3.5, nothing terribly wrong, but I would have liked it if she had a bit more of an appearance change in phase 3 to add emphasis to her new power, plus she looks a bit frail. The arena has a pretty cool bit of progression. It starts out quite narrow, but then when phase 2 hits, all the sides burn down and it expands with the floor burning now. Outside of that, it's nothing too special, but this little bit is enough to give it a 4 out of 5. The music has a nice sense of progression also. I could compare it to Malenia, so I give this a 4 out of 5, giving the sister 16 out of 20 total. I put her slightly above Smough and Ornstein just because I prefer the faster pace of this fight, and the final phase is really epic. I'll never forget the shaking in my hands when I finally beat her for the first time. Number 4. Lady Maria from Bloodborne. Well, from one powerful woman to another, Lady Maria has kicked my ass a number of times. The story behind this fight is great also. Lady Maria swore an oath to never use her blood arts, but she relents and breaks this oath as the fight goes on. So desperate is she for you to not see the atrocities they committed at the fishing hamlet. Pretty tragic, really. The thing that puts this one slightly ahead of Friede for me is the music. The music is one of my favourite tracks from any of these games. It almost has a haunting quality to it. My score is 4.5 out of 5 for music. The combat mechanics are again very solid. This feels like a duel of 2 hunters, and her blood-based attacks in the latter parts of the fight really ramp up the intensity, so I score this a 4.5 out of 5 also. She also looks a bit more badass than Friede with her hunter setup, and the blood-based power-ups between phases are cool, so my score for aesthetics is 4 out of 5. Lastly, the arena with the back of the clock face looking over the battle is a nice visual, even if the rest of the arena doesn't do too much, so I score this 4 out of 5, giving Our Lady Maria a score of 17 out of 20. Fromsoft seems to love these style of fights, judging by this, Malenia and Friede, so I hope we see more of them in future games also. Number 3. Dragonlord Placidusax from Elden Ring. Yep, I was surprised to have this one so high also. But when I look back over the scoring system, I found it pretty difficult to fault this one. The arena is the highest point for me. I score this a 5 out of 5. A large floating coliseum surrounded by lightning. I can't think of many things more epic than that. The music also adds a lot here. Not only is the track great, but the way the music stops while he uses his lightning nuke attack is very unique and really adds emphasis to his power here. I score this a 4.5 out of 5. I think he looks cool. It's the first time that we've seen a dragon with more than one head, unless you count that glitchy Hydra shit in Dark Souls 1. I do wish we could see him in his full glory with all his heads though, instead of rotting away, but I still score it a 4 out of 5. Lastly, for combat mechanics, I think this is the best fight in Elden Ring. A lot of bosses in here tend to have one thing which detracts from the fight in my opinion, stuff like Malenia's Waterfowl Dance, Mog's Nihil, Elden Beasts, Elden Stars, and also the running away, but Placidusax is tough and challenging without any of this, and it's a great fun fight. I score him a 4.5 out of 5, giving him a score of 18 out of 20. Love this fight, and my number one hope for Elden Ring's DLC is to fight this guy with all of his heads. Number 2, Slave Knight Gael from Dark Souls 3. I went back and forth between number 1 and number 2 a lot when making this. For now, I'm putting the final ever Dark Souls boss at number 2, but this could probably change if you ask me on a different day. This boss is so good. I think that's been said a lot, but that praise is deserved. The setting, you're fighting him at the end of time, the whole world is dead apart from you two, and it's the final battle. That is epic as fuck. There's even some crumbling ruins, which you can use for a tiny bit of solace, and lightning which plays into the final phase. Easily a 5 out of 5 for Arena. Combat mechanics are also on point for this, dodging feels great. All the attacks have tails and can be avoided, but it's certainly not easy. The fight flows really well, and so again it's an easy 5 out of 5. For aesthetic, I can't say I'm super into his look with the red hood, and really he's just another armoured guy with a sword, but this is made up for by the effects on his attacks in the second phase, particularly the skulls flying off his cape, representing all the souls he's absorbed up till now. I score him 4.5 out of 5 for aesthetic, and lastly, the music is fucking awesome. The more downplayed part in the first section, leading to the release as the music kicks in for the beginning of the second phase. Truly fantastic and emotional music to bring a close to the Dark Souls series. I score it a 5 out of 5, giving the Slave Knight a score of 19.5 out of 20. Truly one of the crowning achievements of this series in my view. Number 1, Ludwig from Bloodborne. Yep, Ludwig for me is maybe the most creative boss I've ever seen. From a visual standpoint, he is horrifying, but yet unique even in the context of the world of Bloodborne. I can genuinely say I've never seen anything that looks like this before. The mid-battle cutscene is my favourite in the entire series, suddenly regaining his senses upon seeing his sword and then peering at you from behind it. I have to score this a 5 out of 5 for aesthetics for sure. The music for this second phase is also my favourite in the whole series. I've listened to this an enormous amount of times and I still can't get enough of it. It's powerful, haunting, and sounds like some kind of macabre dance number. I score this also a 5 out of 5. As for combat, the first phase achieves this great balance of seemingly incredibly chaotic, but yet there is a method to the madness. His attacks are telegraphed more by the pitch of his screams than visual cues, which is a very Bloodborne thing to do, and knowing this there are ways to avoid all of them. I even managed to get through this phase without taking a hit on my no leveling run, and it was a lot of fun to learn it. In the second phase he's much more organised now, he's regained his senses, but his attacks have much more range and include slash projectiles and AoE waves. I think both phases work great together, and I have fun every time I fight this guy, so I score this a 5 out of 5. Lastly, maybe the only part which isn't flawless is the arena. Don't get me wrong, it looks great with all the blood and the piles of bodies helping to add to the terror of fighting this monstrosity, but I would maybe have liked it to be a bit bigger considering the size of him. Still though, it's not like it's too cramped by any means, and I'd still score it 4.5 out of 5 for its gory presentation. This gives Ludwig a score of 19.5 out of 20. I only put him slightly above Gael today because of how much I like that music in the second phase, and because of the creativity in his visual design. Well, those are my favourites, but what are some of yours? As I said, I'd love to hear in the comments below, and of course if you enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe to support more content. Coming up, I'm working on a certain Dark Souls 2 video, which is a barrel of laughs, and I may also have some random videos talking about other games I'm playing at the moment, like Kirby and the Forgotten Land and Monster Hunter Rise. Until then, have a good one, and see you next time.